Hello and welcome to the Supernatural track here at Continual. I'm your host, Gail C. Martin, and tonight we are talking about how evil is fun. Our favorite SPN villains. But before we get into that, let's let our wonderful panelists introduce themselves, starting with Dawn.
Hi, I'm Roberto. I run a book blog and I do a lot of work for authors on Instagram and Facebook. And I just like Gail and Morgan's books.
Okay. Lynn?
Hi, I'm Dr. Lynn Zubernis. I am a clinical psychologist and a professor at Westchester University, and what I study is fandom, and that fandom is often the fandom of my favorite show, Supernatural. So I've written a bunch of books about the show. The most recent two I've written with the Supernatural actors who all wrote their own chapters about what their experience was like on the show.
Very cool. Elektra?
I'm Elektra Hammond. I'm a writer and an editor, and I've been a fan of Supernatural since that very first episode aired.
And I'm Gail C. Martin, and Morgan Bryce. As Gail, I write epic and urban fantasy. As Morgan, I write urban fantasy, male paranormal romance. But my modern day worlds are ones Sam and Dean could walk into and feel right at home. Fell in love with the show halfway through season 11, binge watched 11 seasons in time for the start of season 12, fell down the rabbit hole and haven't come back to the top yet and hope I never do. So, villains. We had minor villains. We had major villains. We had, the huge apocalyptic villains, and then we had some, rank and file bad guys and minor demons. Let's start with, we'll hit some of the high notes, and then you guys can toss in any of the extras that you want to mention. But we got to start with the big bad, Lucifer. Dawn, how did Lucifer, when he originally showed up, was this how you kind of pictured the devil? I mean, did it take a little while to get into the way Lucifer was portrayed?
Yeah, a little bit. Because for me, I've read books, fantasy books, urban fantasy. Lucifer's the big bad evil guy. And he's portrayed way different than on Supernatural. But the way they brought him in, they built him up to a degree. Like he was like the main big baddie, I guess you could say for me.
Yeah.
Besides Chuck, but that's no other story.
Lynn?
In the beginning, the early seasons when Lucifer was introduced, there was a great buildup, I think, that made us like really, oh my God, it's going to be the Lucifer. And that first season or two that Lucifer, Mark Pellegrino's Lucifer was there, I think he was really scary. And I thought, yeah, he did seem like Lucifer. He had that kind of, I don't know, sinister sort of smirky, but not cartoonish in the beginning at all. I think it got kind of muddied as the show went on. There was sort of Lucifer, which was Sam's hallucination of Lucifer, who was very different, and then somehow that bled into the real Lucifer, I think, when the real Lucifer came back. So eventually I didn't find Lucifer as scary. I found him more kind of annoying and was really hoping someone would eventually kill him and that it would eventually take, which, it eventually did, but he was around till the very end of the show. So
Okay. Elektra?
He wasn't as all-powerful and evil, but one thing he was he was 100% out for himself, and he was pretty much willing to do anything to get what he wanted. He was a very selfish kind of evil. And he might have wiggled a little bit on the road on the way there, but there wasn't a lot of good in him. Most of the bads in Supernatural had redemption in them, just a little bit. Not, there are some that did not. I mean, thinking Knights of Hell, maybe, but Lucifer just did not have any redemption at all. Even when he seemed to, nope, it was all about him, and anything he was talking about, it was just a means to an end.
Hmm. I think
So
one of the things, oh, I'm sorry, go
go
ahead.
ahead.
I was going to say one of the things that struck me about the portrayal of Lucifer that Mark Pellegrino did was that, when we think about it logically out in the daylight, it's like, well, nobody would go along with Lucifer. Yeah, but human history. And I think he had that deceptive charm to the character that you could see people being enticed by. People, usually think they've got a good deal until they suddenly don't. And as the master con man, I thought that Lucifer played that very well. You could see how people, especially those who were desperate to see what they wanted to see, might buy what he was selling, only to find out that, the joke's on them. So I thought Mark brought that insidious charm to the character where you didn't immediately meet him and run screaming because, oh my God, the devil. It was, this guy
Okay,
is not what
Gail,
he's, yeah.
a great way to express this is in a world where everybody else is throwing 1 to 10 for charisma. Lucifer is working with a 20.
Yeah,
He
very
has
good.
just got so much charisma that people just want to believe him. And yeah, a lot of it was just Mark Pellegrino was just oozing charisma.
But I thought
And
it was
and
an,
it was and he had a 25 when he was Rick Springfield.
this is true. It's one of those where if evil looked like evil and looked like a bad deal, most people wouldn't be stupid enough to go for it. They think there's something they're going to get, and he was,
Chocolate.
yeah, he was the perfect one to be selling it.
I did think before we leave the Lucifer
Yeah.
discussion, you mentioned Rick Springfield's portrayal, which I thought was fabulous. I didn't know what to think when Rick Springfield was going to play Lucifer. I kind of couldn't imagine what it was going to be like, but I thought it worked so well, and making him a rock star with all that charisma, the shirtless rock star that everybody is screaming over. I thought that was brilliant. And I also want to give a shout out to Jared Padalecki when he played Lucifer in the end, in the white suit in the garden with that kind of serene sort of, and he was so beautiful. And then he just like snaps Dean's head under his foot. That was like chilling. Like that was such a great portrayal. So everybody, I think, brought a side to Lucifer. Supernatural was on so long that multiple people got to play multiple
Mhm.
roles, and I think all three of them really did a good job.
Yeah, and when we had Sam as Samifer, that evil little smile, that smirky smile in the white suit, geez, I hope I hope Jared never wears a white suit around because we're all just gonna see Samifer.
My only complaint about that was I thought everybody knew that hell was Cleveland, not Chicago. I mean, come on. I love Chicago. Cleveland, not so much.
Not so much, not so much. Well, if we're going to start with the big hitters, then there's Chuck, aka God. Supernatural went there, making God the ultimate bad guy and having it turn out that this whole thing has been scripted for his entertainment and everything Sam and Dean have gone through, everybody they've lost, all the pain, all the heartache, was really basically a TV show for God. And um, there's a casual immorality to that is chilling in its own way, because this is somebody who we're trained to think is the ultimate good. He certainly believes he's the ultimate good, as opposed to Lucifer, who utterly embraces being the ultimate bad. What was your reaction to having Chuck turn out to be a bad guy? Don?
Very weird. It's the only word I can think of. It was like the show played a long game with him. They showed different sides. He was like a side character, kinda. And then, boom. Yep, he flipped. It was very weird to me in a way because God is God. He made humans, humanity, Earth, whatever. And it was just like, okay, he's supposed to be benevolent in what you grew up hearing and learning. And then on Supernatural, it's like, nope, yeah, we're just all a pawn in his chess game.
Okay. Lynn?
I have mixed feelings. I love that they made God the big bad. I think it was a gutsy move, and I'm glad they did it. Um, I love that it was such a long game, but I agree with Dawn. It was also kind of unsettling because Chuck was a character that was like sort of likable. I kind of liked Chuck when he was the writer. I mean, he was no hero, but he was kind of relatable, and I liked his relationship with Becky, and also he was Rob Benedict, and I just love Rob Benedict. How can you have anything but warm feelings for Rob Benedict? So it was quite a feat to make somebody who was kind of so likable as a character and as an actor into the big bad. But I do like that they did it, and I do think Rob really pulled it off. I mean, to the extent that Rob, the real person, was like getting like hate messages, and people, were, which has never happened. I mean, Rob is the most lovable person ever. He was quite like, oh my God, like what is happening? I'm not used to people being like this with me. So, I mean, I guess that's the mark of a good actor, right? That
Wow.
people actually didn't like him. I don't like the part of the arc where they took it to the extent of nothing Sam and Dean had ever done was because they had skills and knowledge and, were pretty badass, that it was just Chuck pulling the strings. I pretend that episode doesn't exist, but the rest of the arc I liked.
Well, it's interesting because, um, in mainstream Christianity, there is the predestination versus free will argument. And that kind of what you're talking about with, well, everything you did was in my plan, harkens to the predestination. And yet everything they did undoes the predestination to fight for free will, and that final big fight with Chuck. So I thought that was interesting too, that whoever wrote the character and set up the confrontation also knew enough about the theology to play off both sides. Elektra?
Um, I liked I liked the aspect of God as the ultimate writer and the ultimate frustrated writer, because it was fun to watch that aspect of him, and him basically getting pissed off because his characters weren't listening to him and were going off and doing what they wanted. And not only ultimate frustrated writer, but ultimate frustrated writer who can only write one plot. And damn it, he wants them to do that plot whether they want to or not. And
Mhm.
he just could not handle it. And coming from the people who brought you, well, if we're going to do angels, we're going to make them dicks. This whole idea of we're going to do God, but he's just not going to be a nice guy. We should have seen it coming, but we didn't. And
Yep.
it was just so much fun. And they really played it out. And they owe a thank you to J. Michael Swarzinski, Babylon 5, because science fiction people are willing to wait until the arcs play out all the way. And they were willing to let things simmer and say, you know, if we didn't get to play it all the way out, we didn't get to play it all the way out, but we're not going to shorten it up. And it's
Mhm,
just because they let it play out and we got all the hints along the way, it's really, really satisfying.
mhm. Well, in that final scene where they're holding each other up and they're bloodied and they're battered at the lakeside facing down Chuck, and they're still saying, "To hell with you. We're still not going to be your
But
puppets."
but they were
Absolutely.
just the distraction that whole time.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
that whole thing was just the distraction. And they every single thing they did leading up was just, you know, it was scripted sort of by them, but not really because they couldn't let God Chuck know what they were doing. And it was just so wonderful. That episode is just so beautifully written.
Hmm.
It I mean, I love it as a fan of the series, and I love it as a writer,
Hmm.
and it's so damn satisfying.
Hmm. Well, before we get into angels, because we all know angels are dicks, let's talk about Amara, the darkness. Dawn, what was your feeling on that big bad?
Oh, she was interesting. I found her very complex a little bit. For me, it was more like she was the God is light. She was more the darkness. She was like the twin, but just as powerful.
Hmm.
And sh everything that she did in Supernatural, especially in season 8, when she possesses the baby Amara, with I found it interesting, especially as a reader, for me to see she had levels. In my mind, she had a lot of levels and hidden corners. She wasn't all darkness,
Okay.
like because she showed mercy sometimes.
Okay. Lynn?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't find her as frightening as I feel like I was supposed to find her. You know, in the very beginning when it was the darkness is coming and like the storm, and it seemed like she would be very scary, and then she wasn't really that scary. I do think, yeah, she was kind of complicated. I mean, and this it's the story turns out that her brother, you know, treated her horribly. So there's a little bit of a sympathy with her there. I don't know. I think the most interesting part of that whole arc was her relationship with Dean, and how, you know, Dean was the chosen one for her, and what that did to Sam and Dean's relationship, and how Sam, you know, had a chance to say, like, let me be the one who helps you this time. You know, you are weakened this time. You can't expect yourself to fight against her because this is what's happening. So let me be kind of the big brother. I thought that flip flop in their relationship was interesting. And I thought it was interesting in the end that, you know, she was sort of absorbed back into Chuck. It was a very weird it was a very weird arc. It was one of those where if you try to explain it to people who didn't watch Supernatural, they're like, "What now? She was what now?"
Yeah.
But Emily Swallow was great, and I love Emily Swallow, so there's that.
She was sympathetic.
Yeah, she was. Yeah.
Electra?
Um, Lynn hit a lot of that on the head. She started out as this enormous big bad that looked like she was going to be absolutely unfightable with what they had available to them, that she was going to be all powerful. And then it was, well, it seemed like the writers weren't quite sure where they were going with that. So they just sent her off to Vegas to play Keno. Um, for like a couple of episodes while they figured out what exactly they were doing. and a lot of it was about relationships, and she definitely had a lot of fondness for Dean, which we were all very jealous of, obviously. And uh, and it was fun to watch her interact with Team Free Will and try and help them, but fighting against her brother, who she'd been with since the beginning of eternity. It was a really hard thing to do, and there was the question of what was going to happen if they got rid of God.
Mhm.
And that created a lot of really good and interesting questions. Um, so it was a lot of fun to watch, and they revisited the how all she had to be all powerful, because of course Chuck was all powerful, and so that got interesting again. But she spent a good chunk of the season just, oh well, yeah, she's off in Vegas, and she was like shopping and playing Keno. It was funny, but I mean, I guess there were some good Monster of the Week episodes in there while she was doing it, but it seemed like a waste of a fantastic character in there.
Yeah, I've got to say yes to all of that. She was probably one of the big bads that did not really resonate with me. I get what they were trying to do. It just didn't hit with me, I guess, the way they wanted it to. But I did find it interesting to see Dean's vulnerability to her, and yet Sam didn't have that same vulnerability. And, it's kind of the way it is in real life, is that people have different weaknesses. And sometimes those weaknesses keep them from being at the front of a push, but somebody else can take the front because they don't have the same weakness. And I think it was very interesting to see the brothers work that out in their dynamic.
Wasn't that tied to Dean having had the mark?
Hmm. Yeah,
Because she was literally the mark.
the mark. Yeah. But I thought that was a very interesting part of it. So let's look at Dick Roman, the Leviathans, and while we're talking about them, let's throw the Stein family in there too, just for giggles. Um, None of those played out a long arc, but they were memorable. Dawn?
They were, to me, a little bit different.
Okay.
They didn't interest me as much. I don't know. Maybe it was just my mood that day.
Okay. Fair
It was
enough.
just it was more of the Stein family kind of creeped me out.
I think they were supposed to.
Yeah, well, they're like the Frankenstein family.
Right, right. Yeah.
But yeah, so they were just a little too freaky. I wasn't a very big Frankenstein person, so that kind of was just like, nope, nope, don't like them. I was afraid I'd have nightmares.
Okay.
So them,
Yeah, I mean, I don't find the Steins that memorable. They were in, I don't know how many episodes they were in. I don't think
One.
they were in, oh, only one? Well,
I
that
think they were
No, they
only,
were in a couple.
I
oh,
think
they
they were in,
were?
I
Okay.
think they were in a couple, but they're not particularly memorable to me. I don't think they really developed them. They were just sort of like a monster of the week bad guy characters. They were scary, but I don't find them very memorable. I love Dick Roman. It may be because I love James Patrick Stewart, who is on my other fan favorite show, General Hospital, and I love him on that one too. I just think he's such a good actor. The Leviathan storyline got kind of old. I think it was a great idea. I love that what it had to say about rich, selfish billionaires in power, and how they would actually like to turn humans into like apathetic, complacent victims and then consume them and just get them to do whatever they want them to do. It rings so frighteningly close to home, especially now. But I think that James Patrick Stewart has so much charisma, and he's just so likable that he invested Dick Roman with this kind of wicked sense of humor that I could not help but like every time he was on screen. He's one of those actors that just has a ton of charisma. So, as much as the Leviathans themselves, I thought were interesting for a couple episodes, and then I was sort of like, eh. But I really love Dick Roman. I mean, I was happy when he got killed because, you know, he killed Bobby. You don't do that and get to live. So I was happy that he was sent back to purgatory, but I thought he was a great character while he was on screen.
Okay, Elektra?
I'm gonna second Lynn on the Dick Roman was a great character, and it was back to they're just people, but being super rich is a superpower in and of itself when you get to that level. They showed that again in The French Mistake, when instead of trying to figure out how to steal something, they just charged it on a credit card. You know, being super rich has its rewards. The problem with the Leviathans is they gave them like a whole season, and once they figured out how to kill them, they were boring. Truly. I mean, simple household cleaners. Okay, well, they're not interesting anymore. And then they didn't give a good explanation for why you couldn't kill Dick Roman the same way. Um, and that made us a little bit confusing. Why is he special? Um, the Steins were, yeah, super creepy, not greatly interesting, but once we saw them and Dean didn't treat them particularly seriously, they're the ones that killed Charlie. They came down to the bunker. They knew where the bunker was. They came down to the bunker. They tried to burn the bunker. They destroyed a whole bunch of books. They burned books. They are the most evil people practically in the world. They burned valuable books that could not be replaced. They're just
Mhm.
pure evil. Oh, I hate them. And then, you know, Dean like chased them down because they killed Charlie when he had like the mark upon him, and he went and found them and like killed the whole family because, well, they killed Charlie and she was like his sister. But they were a bad thing upon the earth and deserved to be gone, but they could have been a continuing enemy they ran into every now and again and, you know, killed off another family member. That could have been like the British men of letters. That could have been a continuing annoyance until they had a showdown. They could have
Yeah.
been handled somewhat better.
They were proficient enough bad guys to have been around a little longer and caused a few more problems. Dick Roman and the Leviathans, I agree, you know, kind of left me cold, not the most memorable. But I will say, you know, I wasn't raised Catholic, so I didn't grow up with the concept of purgatory. That was something I learned about much later and didn't grow up with it as a tenet of faith. So my view will forever be shaped by Supernatural because it didn't get shaped by dogma. And I never really gave purgatory much thought until we got to Supernatural. I was like, oh, well, what would be running around purgatory?
Really, really cute vampires,
Mhm,
apparently.
apparently so. Well, now we get to the angels and demons and, you know, all the others, but let's start that off with Metatron.
Yeah, I wanted to make sure you didn't forget
Oh,
him.
I wasn't going to forget him.
Okay.
Dawn?
He was like he was interesting to me. He wanted to be a major player he was God's keeper of God's written word. He had lofty ideas for his own ascension, but I also found him arrogant. And after a while he was bitter. And it made him kind of interesting, but then again, in my mind, not really keeping my attention. But that's just me. It could have been just me not liking him to begin with.
Okay, Lynn?
I feel like I always get very, I tend to have affection for characters when I have affection for the actors who play them. And I love Curtis Armstrong to death. So I never could really hate Metatron. Although, once again, once you've stabbed Dean right in front of Sam and killed him, then you have to go. But I thought Metatron was a great character. I mean, I wanted to like him. He's a scribe, he's a writer. He loves like the stories of humanity. He's complicated, he's sort of smart, he's unassuming. I mean, there's a lot of things initially to like about him, but he also is bitter, Dawn's right, from being exiled, and he does develop ambitions of his own. On the other hand, I love the episode where he and Chuck are, sitting in the bar, and Chuck is showing Metatron the pages that he's written, and Metatron is slowly realizing like who Chuck really is as God and what his plans are. And he seems to be genuinely horrified by that. And we sort of see what's happening with Chuck slash God through Metatron's eyes. And Curtis is so good that I can still see all of those scenes. I can see Metatron's face as he reads those pages and the truth starts to sink in. Like those two together in that episode were so good and so powerful that I can still see scenes from that episode. And I also think, as much as it was like an unbelievably painful scene, the fight where he does kill Dean is also really, really powerful and had such an incredible impact. So, not a good guy, obviously, but I think he's one of the complicated villains. And I wouldn't say he's one of the ones that I was like, oh, I can't stand that guy. I thought he was very, very interesting.
Okay. Electra?
I think Lynn again hit it there with the word complicated. And I too love Curtis Armstrong for a lot of the things that he's done. Metatron eventually wanted to be rewarded for all of the things that he had done and all of the millennia he had spent next to God, just writing down his word and doing what he was told and being so faithful. And God did not raise him up and make him an archangel. And he wanted, it's like, Lucifer didn't do what you wanted him to do, and why aren't you being nice to me? I've always done what you wanted. And eventually that led to well, if I don't get to be God, then nobody gets to be in heaven. And he kicked all the angels out of heaven and then was running around on earth healing people because, well, maybe I can be a God among the humans. Why not?
I agree with everybody in terms of, Curtis Armstrong's brilliance in terms of playing that character. He just honestly annoyed me so much. I was in a hurry to get him off the stage. Some one of my favorites, I have to admit. But let's move on to two that really were favorites despite being bad guys, Crowley and Rowena. Dawn?
I loved Crowley. Crowley was my favorite, even though he was portrayed as a bad guy in the beginning. I just loved the fact that he balanced his menacing side with humor.
Mm-hmm.
He was funny. He always made me laugh in some way. And I liked how he can be an ally or an antagonist. It just depends on his whim to me.
Mm-hmm.
But he was fun. I liked him. I thought he was fun.
Okay. Lynn, Crowley and Rowena?
Yes, I love both of them to the moon and back. I think it is such a testament. Supernatural did it's a really difficult thing to write a redemption arc that actually works. I think oftentimes redemption arcs don't work that well because the audience doesn't really forget or forgive the terrible things that the person or demon or whatever did in the beginning. But I think with Rowena and Crowley, they really wrote it so well. I mean, when you think back into their, especially the early episodes, they both did just horrible things and were horrible people slash demons, witches, whatever. But by the time the show was, in its final third, they were frenemies, like for real. They were frenemies. And I think most people had a lot of affection for them. They were both likable. I mean, Mark Shepard and Ruth Connell obviously are unbelievably good at what they do. And I think that redemption arc was successful. I mean, by the time Rowena was connecting with Sam over both of their shared trauma with Lucifer, I was 100% team Rowena. And, when Crowley eventually sacrificed himself for the Winchesters, I was genuinely like crying because the character had made that sacrifice. So I really give them credit for being able to do that. I also really appreciated that they gave Rowena and Crowley together a backstory that was extremely fraught and complicated. Rowena and Fergus, her son, which Mark Shepard is fond of saying, I'm Crowley, I'm not Fergus. But he was in some ways. And they did have that really fraught, complicated mother son relationship that I actually really wish we had gotten more of. I think they both played it in such a nuanced way. And even when they were cruel to each other, you got glimpses of the fact that they did really care about each other and never really got to fully express that, which is like really tragic. I don't mind Supernatural being tragic sometimes. I don't think it was meant to be a show that was la 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 la. So I love everything about Rowena and Crowley's arc.
Okay, Elektra?
That's another one of the great bits of patience that these writers showed, where we had Crowley around for a while and grew to love him. Even as he, was working with the boys and not working with the boys and all the push back and forth where they work together somewhat, but I don't have to like you, but sometimes we have to work with people we do not like for the greater bad or good or to make sure we still have a planet. And then at some point we got introduced to Rowena, and Rowena was kind of cool and all that. And then at some point, Rowena and Crawley are thrown together, and we're wondering what the hell's going to happen here. And he just looks up and says, "Hello, mother." And it just threw me. So I never even expected them to know each other, much less be related. And like you said, that wonderful, complicated backstory with all of the layers and how they work their way through. And somehow we got fantastic redemption arcs for both of them. You don't see that many. The big one that comes to mind outside of Supernatural is Jaime Lannister on the original Game of Thrones. And through all of Game of Thrones, I don't think there's another one. That's how hard it is. It's so hard to make people like a character who's done bad things and to have them understand they've done bad things and that they want to truly be forgiven. It's difficult. I grew to love, well, I loved Rowena from the moment I saw her, but I really grew to love Crowley. I think around the time I saw his cell phone and realized that it said moose, and sometimes it said not moose, as opposed to saying squirrel, which was the obvious joke. He was just so delightful in that role because I loved him from, I think, the New Galactica and from some other stuff. Mark Shepard is just a delight in everything he does.
Mm-hmm.
And I look forward to seeing both of them doing all sorts of other things.
Mm-hmm.
God, there's so much good stuff out there these days.
And yes to all of that. I mean, Rowena and Crowley were two of my favorites. even when they were bad, they were likable. And the redemption arc was fantastic. I think that the actors played them phenomenally well, and that was a very difficult and tricky thing to do, but they pulled it off, and I think it was extremely memorable. Well, folks, we have blown through our time and we still have some angels and demons to go. So we're just going to have to do another round on this at some point. But for now, I'd like to go around and give everybody a chance to say where we can find you online. And if you have a new, recent, or upcoming book, let us know. Dawn?
I'm on Instagram. You can look under at love to read 030. I post a lot of books and other stuff there for authors. You can find me on Facebook underneath Dawn Roberto, or you can go to my blog. It's Dawn's Reading Nook at Blogspot.
Very good. Lynn?
Find me on all social media at Fangasm SPN. You can find all my books on Amazon or on my website, fangasmthebook.com. I do have a new book that I'm working on, but it won't be out until 2027. It's for a book series that Intellect is doing called TV Matters on the television shows that have been most influential. And you might guess that I'm doing the Supernatural volume.
Cool. Very cool. Elektra?
I'm Elektra Hammond. Find me at www.untilmidnight.com and on Mondays from 7 to 8 on Mastodon, look for hashtag WriteFant, where one of us will be, one of the hosts will ask 4 questions on a random topic, and everybody is invited to answer them, and conversation continues, and it's silly and fun, and if we can get a crowd going, it's even sillier and funnier. So come join us, WriteFant, on Monday nights.
Sounds great. I'm Gail Z. Martin and Morgan Bryce. If you go to those .coms, you'll find my websites. And if you spell them right, you'll find me on all the social medias. The newest Gail book is Sinistrom in my Night Vigil series. We just brought out Necessities in my Morgan Bryce Fox Hollow Shifter series. And in late August, Glow will come out, which is part of a 6-author Legends series of monster romances. So there's something to look forward to. Well, thank you all so much for being wonderful panelists, and thanks to all of you for watching and listening. There will be more Supernatural coming up on Continual, so we'll see you online.